was Christmas on the island of Sodor. All the engines were working hard. Thomas and Toby were busy carrying people and parcels up and down the branch line. Everyone was happy. Only the coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, were complaining. "It's always the same before Christmas," they groaned. "We feel so full. We feel so full." "Oh, come on," said Thomas. "Where's your festive spirit? Christmas Day is almost here." By the side of the track was a little cottage with a familiar figure waving to them. "It's Mrs. Kindley," whistled Thomas. "Beep, beep! Happy Christmas!" Thomas always felt better for seeing her. Christmas just wouldn't be Christmas without Mrs. Kindley, he said to himself. When work was over, Thomas went to see the other engines. All their coats had been polished. "Huh," said Gordon. "Just look at us. Your driver will have to work fast to get you as smart as us." "Never mind that," replied Thomas. "I've something important to say. Do you realize it's been a whole year since Mrs. Kindley saved us from a nasty accident? You remember when she was ill in bed and—" "Yes, of course," interrupted Edward. "You told us how she waved her red dressing gown out of her window to warn you about a landslide ahead." "And you and Toby gave her presents?" Percy joined in. "And Sir Topham Hatt sent her to the seaside to get better." "But," said the other engines, "the rest of us never thanked her properly." "Exactly," said Thomas. "So now I think we should all give her a special Christmas party." Everyone was getting very excited, and the drivers felt sure that Sir Topham Hatt would agree, as indeed he did. The engines were all busy making plans when silence fell. Sir Topham Hatt had bad news. "The weather's changed badly. Mrs. Kindley is snowed up. Toby says he'll help to rescue her. You must help too, Thomas. There's no party unless you do." Thomas hated snow, but he said bravely, "I'll try, sir. We must rescue her. We must." "There's a good engine. You and Toby will manage splendidly." Thomas charged the snowdrifts fiercely. Sometimes he swept them aside. Sometimes they stuck fast. And the men had to loosen them. But at the cutting near the cottage, they could go no further. "Look at that!" exclaimed Thomas's fireman. "Beep, beep! Here we are!" An answering wave came from an upstairs window. Then they heard a familiar sound. "That's Terence, the tractor," said Thomas. "He's come to help too." Sure enough, Terence had a snowplow and was working hard to clear a patch to the railroad line and safety. At long last, the rescue was complete. Percy took the tired workmen home. Terence said goodbye to Mrs. Kindley and promised to take care of her cottage as he watched them all set off. The engines made good time. No more snow had fallen, but the yard was dark. There was no one to be seen. Thomas's heart sank. Suddenly, all the lights went on. What a marvelous sight awaited Mrs. Kindley. "Well done," said Sir Topham Hatt. "I'm really proud of you all." Mrs. Kindley especially thanked the smaller engines. "Thomas and Toby are old friends," she said. "And now, Percy, you are my friend too." Percy was very pleased. "3 cheers for Mrs. Kindley," he called. "Beep, beep, beep." They all whistled. "We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year." Thomas the tank engine and his friends thought it was the best Christmas ever, and Mrs. Kindley could think of nowhere she would rather live than here with them on the island of Sodor. It was 2 days before Christmas. Many children were expected on the island of Sodor. All the engines were busy with the final preparations. Sir Topham Hatt wanted this year's carol party to be an extra special celebration. Sir Topham Hatt was now waiting impatiently for Thomas. "Quickly now," he said. "Our Christmas tree has arrived just in time. I want you to fetch it, Thomas. Duck can look after Annie and Clarabelle until you get back." "Will we be able to sing carols too?" asked Thomas. "We'll see," promised Sir Topham Hatt. "It would be nice to sing carols again," sighed Thomas as he set off on his important mission. Thomas collected the tree safely, but large snowdrifts lay ahead. "I mustn't be late," he thought. "Sir Topham Hatt is relying on me." Whistling bravely, Thomas tried to move, but he couldn't. There was worse to come. Thomas was snowed under. Meanwhile, the other engines waited and waited. They were grumbling about Thomas for being late. "Silence," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Thomas left the work safely, but snow has brought the telephone lines down. We must assume he is stranded." The engines now felt sorry for Thomas, and cold but confident, the twins set off to the rescue. Suddenly, they came to a drift that was deeper than the rest. "Help!" "Hush," said Donald. "I can hear something." "Probably the wind," said Douglas. "Help!" "No, listen," insisted Donald. "Over here!" "Oh, it's Thomas. Come on, the poor wee engine must be frozen to the frames in there." When the workmen arrived, it took some time to decide how to dig away the heavy drifts of snow. Thomas's driver and fireman, who had taken shelter at a nearby cottage, joined the rescue. At last, Thomas and the precious Christmas tree were freed from the snowdrift. Then they set off once more to finish their long journey. Sir Topham Hatt greeted them warmly. "As a reward for all your hard work, you may go and enjoy the carols. Be quick now." At the big station, all was soon ready. 1, 2, 3! Suddenly, like magic, the station was flooded with lights. "Ladies and gentlemen and children, I give you 3 cheers for Thomas the Tank Engine and all his friends who have made this occasion possible." Then there was a familiar whirring sound. Percy and Toby smiled. They knew who it was. With landing lights shining brightly, Harold the helicopter touched down gently in the snow. Bringing the greatest surprise of all, Santa Claus. Everyone cheered and the party began. "It's no fun getting stuck in the snow," whispered Thomas to Percy, "but it was worth it for this party. Happy holiday, Percy. Happy holiday, everyone."
It was winter time on the island of Sodor. The snow covered fields and railway lines. All the engines were hard at work, except Percy. "Come on, Percy. This is no time to have a rest." "I'm stuck," moaned Percy, "and my funnel's freezing up. Driver's gone for help." "Ha!" huffed Thomas, and went on his way. Later, Thomas had to help clear snow by a tunnel, but it was too deep, and he got stuck. Thomas was very cross. "Snow is nothing but trouble," he moaned. Rusty was close by. "Driver says this winter is as bad as the worst winter of all." "How worst?" asked Thomas. "I'll tell you," replied Rusty, and then the little engine did. Skarloey was working the line to the slate mine in the mountains. When the snow came, it was difficult to work. They used the snow as a double buffer zone to help stop cars skidding through the ravine. One day, Skarloey set off to the mines with some empty cars. Meanwhile, there was trouble at the mine. The winch that hauls the cars up and down wasn't working properly. Skarloey had reached the ravine. High above him were the mine yards. "That snow looks dangerous," said his driver. "The sound of your engine and the freight cars could cause an avalanche. I'll set off an emergency cap and see what happens." Skarloey watched as his driver prepared it. Then they ran over the cap. The bang echoed around the gorge. Nothing happened. "Good," said his driver. "All's well. We'll have a cup of cocoa and then make our way." But high above them, all was not well. A long line of full cars was about to be winched down the slope. They had just started their journey when some empty cars became derailed. The winch groaned. "Break it! Snap it!" shouted the freight cars. And they did. On, faster, faster," they giggled. "The snowbank and buffers will stop them," said a workman. But he was wrong. The freight cars plunged into the ravine. Skarloey and his driver heard the noise and looked up. "Avalanche!" they cried. When the snow plume cleared, there was no sign of Skarloey. He was buried deep inside the high drift, blocking the ravine. And then came the funny part. "What's the funny part about an avalanche?" asked Thomas. "Well..." No one knew that the heat from Skarloey's engine had helped to make an igloo. "It's a snowball. It's a snow house. It's an engine." They cleared away the ice, only to find Skarloey's driver and fireman drinking cocoa as if nothing had happened. "Lucky for him, but it just goes to show you can't trust freight cars," said Thomas. "Or snow," said Rusty. The men had just cleared the snow away from him when Gordon puffed by with his machine. "Hey, look out! There's snow about!" He stopped by the tunnel and wheezed loudly. Then it happened. Oh no. "Help!" cried Gordon. "If Skarloey survived a snowfall, surely a big proud engine like you can do the same," chuckled Thomas. "Paw!" moaned Gordon from within, and then fell as silent as the snow. It was an icy day on the island of Sodor. The engines were working very hard. They didn't mind the cold because they had toasting hot fireboxes to keep them warm. That evening, Sir Topham Hatt came to the sheds. "There's a big freeze coming tonight," he said. "James and Percy are to deliver extra coal to the stations." "Yes, sir," they said eagerly, and Sir Topham Hatt drove away. "You'd better hurry," teased Thomas, "or scary Jack Frost might get you." "Who's Jack Frost?" Percy whistled nervously. "Don't be so silly," sniffed James. "Jack Frost is not scary." "Yes, he is," teased Thomas. "He's all white with a big spiky face." "Rubbish," said James. James knew Jack Frost wasn't scary, but poor Percy wasn't so sure. Percy shivered. "Jack Frost is not scary. Jack Frost is not scary. Jack Frost is not scary." Meanwhile, James puffed along his route. "Silly Percy," he thought, "all steamed up over Jack Frost." Percy made his last delivery. The station master was very pleased to see him. "Oh, Percy," he cried, "we need twice as much coal to last through this freeze." "Don't worry," Percy said. "This is my last stop. You can have mine." So Percy's driver parked him in a siding with only a lantern for company. "Do you think scary Jack Frost will find me?" said Percy. "Jack Frost's not scary," chuckled his driver. "And don't worry, Elizabeth will bring you some more coal in the morning." And then his driver and fireman went home to bed. Late at night, the icy wind howled. It started to snow. Soon Percy's face was so cold, an icicle hung from his nose. "Oh, bother," Percy stuttered, but it didn't sound like Percy. It was so cold he could hardly make a sound. At last, James was on his way back to the sheds. In the fog, he saw shadows and strange and scary shapes. "Scary Jack Frost," he whispered nervously. "Pah!" "Hello, James?" muttered Percy icily. "Scary Jack Frost," cried James, and he raced away as fast as his wheels could carry him. He didn't stop until he got back to the sheds. The next morning, Elizabeth brought plenty of coal. "Oh, my dear," Elizabeth chuffed to Percy, "it looks like Jack Frost really got you." The firelighter started Percy's fire. Soon his ice mask melted away. So scary Jack Frost is only frost, tooted Percy happily, and soon he was as warm as toast. When Percy arrived at the sheds, James was bragging to the other engines. "I saw scary Jack Frost last night," James huffed. "He even knows my name." "He also knows that you ran away," teased Percy. And all the engines whistled, including James. But Percy's was the loudest whistle of all.
It was Christmas time on the island of Sodor, and Sir Topham Hatt's engines were busy. The snow made their journeys difficult. They had to work hard to deliver passengers and goods to their destinations on time. This made the engines feel very reliable. Elizabeth pulled into the fitter's yard with Thomas's snowplow. "I don't need that silly old thing," huffed Thomas. "Stuff and nonsense," steamed Elizabeth. "You can't be a reliable engine if you can't get through the snow." That made Thomas cross. "You know I'm reliable. I just don't like my snowplow." "Elizabeth is rude," Thomas chuffed. "And this snowplow makes my buffers ache." Later, Thomas saw Sir Topham Hatt talking to Elizabeth. "The Sodor cake factory is snowed in. Their Christmas cakes must get to the docks before the ship sails for the mainland." "Let me do the job." "I need you on your line, Thomas. Besides, Elizabeth knows those roads well. She's very reliable." "I'm reliable too," huffed Thomas. "Apparently not reliable enough," Elizabeth chuffed. Now Thomas was crosser still. The snow was heavy, but Thomas arrived at every station right on time. Elizabeth was struggling to stay on the road. Her wheels did not like the slippery ice at all. When Thomas arrived at the docks to pick up Terence, he was surprised that Elizabeth had not returned. "The ship will miss the tide," said the dock manager. "And the children won't have their Christmas cakes. Thomas, go and look for Elizabeth at once." "Yes, sir," answered Thomas. "Perhaps Elizabeth isn't so reliable after all," he whispered. At the cake factory, Elizabeth was piled high with crates of Christmas cakes. "Sir Topham Hatt's counting on me. I mustn't be late." She chuffed onto the icy road. Suddenly, she was on a steep hill. Her driver applied the brakes. Elizabeth slid out of control into a deep snowdrift. Poor Elizabeth. Thomas and Terence puffed through the swirling snow. They couldn't see Elizabeth anywhere. Soon they spotted her driver. He was standing by the level crossing. "Elizabeth is stuck under the snow," her driver explained. "I need help to dig her out." Terence rescued her in no time. "We will have to hurry," said Thomas. "It wasn't your fault, Elizabeth. It's the slippery roads." Elizabeth felt much better. Thomas chuffed and puffed as fast as he could. They reached the docks just in time. Sir Topham Hatt was delighted to see the bakery crates and that Elizabeth was safe and well. "We'll get you unloaded immediately." "Now the children will have their Christmas cakes," said Thomas. "Well done," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Oh, thank you, Thomas," said Elizabeth. "You and I are both reliable." Thomas agreed. It was cold and snowy on the island of Sodor, but everyone was jolly. The winter holidays were coming. Thomas loved this time of year. The station masters decorated the stations, and children were making snowmen. But there was one thing Thomas didn't like about winter. There was always lots and lots of snow. It piled up very quickly and blocked the tracks. So Thomas worked hard all day keeping the lines open. Thanks to Thomas, everything ran on time. All the engines were very pleased. They wanted to thank Thomas for all his hard work. When all the tracks were clear, Thomas was looking forward to seeing his friends. He had missed them. As he puffed towards the station, he saw Harold the helicopter talking to Toby. They were planning a thank you surprise for Thomas. "Hello!" he chuffed. "Remember, Toby," said Harold, "don't tell Thomas about the surprise." Then Harold buzzed away, and Toby puffed back to his yard. Thomas felt left out. He liked surprises. That afternoon, Thomas was puffing along the main line. He saw Percy waiting in the station. Percy's trucks were loaded with brightly colored boxes. "Are they part of the surprise?" Thomas asked. Percy was bursting to tell his friend about it, but he raced away so that he wouldn't spoil the surprise. Thomas was cross. Later, Thomas had to stop at a signal. As he waited, Emily arrived. Thomas noticed something strange on Emily's freight car. It was long and pointy, but it was covered up. "Is that part of the surprise?" he asked. "That," said Emily, "is for me to know and you to find out." And she puffed away. "Bother!" wheezed Thomas. "If they won't tell me," Thomas huffed, "I'll find out myself." Thomas secretly followed Emily. He puffed as quietly as he could. And he didn't follow too closely. Suddenly, Emily turned down one of the branch lines. Thomas raced after her, but just as he got to the branch line, the signalman changed the points. Thomas had to go straight ahead. "Cinders and ashes!" cried Thomas. "How will I ever find out what the surprise is?" That evening, the engines were very excited. They were all talking about Thomas's surprise. "I can't wait," chuffed Edward. "He'll love it," puffed Percy. But then, Thomas arrived. "Shh," said James. "Don't tell Thomas," said Henry. Thomas felt more left out than ever. It wasn't fair. Everyone knew what the surprise was except Thomas. "Huh? If they won't tell me, I don't want to know," he huffed. Thomas steamed crossly away. He puffed as far as he could. At last, it was time to show Thomas the surprise. But no one knew where Thomas had gone. "Please find him, Harold," Edward puffed. "I'll do my best," said Harold, and he took to the air. Thomas was parked in a siding. He was cold and sad. Why was he the only one not to know what the surprise was? If only they would tell him. Then Thomas heard a noise. It was coming from the sky. It was Harold, the helicopter. "There you are, old chap," he called. "It's time for you to collect the children and to see the surprise." "The children?" puffed Thomas. "Yes," said Harold. "It's a special thank you for keeping the lines clear of snow." Thomas was delighted. Finally, he was going to find out what the surprise was. "So I wasn't being left out," cried Thomas. "Of course not," said Harold. "The children are waiting for you at Wellsworth Station." Thomas loved pulling carriages full of children, so he raced away. Soon he arrived at Wellsworth Station. Thomas collected the children. He puffed through the snowy countryside. The children were very excited. They all wanted to know what the surprise was. Thomas turned down the branch line.
See how the night sky glows. See the light from the night train, the fireblood from the night train. On down the line he goes. Ooh, on down the line he goes. On through the night he goes. Hear the sound of the night train, the chugga-chug-chug of the night train. Hear how his whistle blows. Ooh, hear how his whistle blows. Rolling, heaving, big engine breathing, pistons pushing side by side. Driver checking, gauging, hearing, fireman stoking by his side.
Soon they arrived at a country village, and there was Thomas's surprise. A huge Christmas tree was standing in the village square. Its lights shone and its baubles twinkled. And at the bottom of the tree were lots of presents. There was even some tinsel for Thomas. "It's the best surprise I ever had," Thomas puffed happily.